cost of prosecution was 31 billion US dollars. It's a huge cost. I'm not even looking at imprisonment terms. This is just prosecution. UNCLOS 101 covers definition of piracy. It is further supplemented by Articles 105, 106 and 107 that actually place certain limitations on anti-piracy operations. First of all, these articles are considered restrictive as they are limited to acts of piracy on the high seas, as I covered, or in a place outside the jurisdiction of any state. When you look at the area of Bay of Bengal, Straits of Malacca, Singapore and South China Sea, you realize that any such acts of piracy have always been in maritime zones under certain national jurisdiction. RECAP has done a wonderful job. There are structures in place, but we need to strengthen the arms of law enforcement and the maritime forces that are engaging in anti-piracy patrols. Additionally, seizure is restricted to warship or ships that are clearly marked and identified as being on government service and authorized to that effect. I'm sure we can expand this ambit a little bit should we wish to. And seizure on inadequate grounds would hold the state affecting the seizure liable for loss and damages. And herein comes the issue that you need evidence. Pirates, what do? When they see a ship coming, they throw everything overboard. Where is the evidence? You cannot prosecute. And therefore, there's a dilemma. Do you take action or not? Coming to prosecution issues, they are complex, but they are more practical than judicial. First of all, the number of nations and companies with interest in investments in the maritime domain would dictate certain terms as far as these issues are concerned. Then there is the application of inter-nation judicial procedures. Extradition is one. How a nation deals with the persons under prosecution, the standards and conditions of its jails, the length of the judicial process, all that comes into play. Other is the place of prosecution and place of imprisonment. The British Admiralty in 1700s tried to establish Admiralty courts in various places, but it came to absolutely no use because the local population, especially people of influence, were supporting acts of piracy. So they shifted it to London. This is the days of sale. Again, you get back to the issue of witnesses, evidence. It took a long time. It never worked out. There are certain legal obstacles to effective prosecution, and some of them lie in existing international laws itself. International humanitarian law, including Geneva Convention, human rights treaties, international refugee law, even UNCLOS itself, as I have covered. And this is the reason why many nations are unwilling to prosecute pirates, since the pirates may seek asylum. And I go back to the case of Alondra Rainbow, 1999, which was a good case of cooperation between various nations, and finally the pirates were arrested. But the case took so long that the bossman of the pirates apparently asked the judge and said, "Sir, please give me Indian citizen. I've been here for a decade at least." So these are practical issues, as I say. So what is the way ahead as far as this is concerned? Now, here as I get down to little brass tacks, one is we need to establish an anti-piracy framework. We have lots of establishments, institution practices in progress, but we need to get a framework that is all-encompassing. And therefore, one is, let's try to look at a common definition of piracy, which includes all maritime zones outside national jurisdiction, and here I refer to territorial seas. Perhaps seek a revision of UNCLOS. Our Southeast Asian nations, the majority of Asian nations and India have been on the same platform when it came to certain aspects of UNCLOS. There are bigger issues are there. So if you're going to seek for a redefinition of piracy, why not add maritime terrorism also and get on with it? Encourage formulation of anti-piracy legislation. We had an anti-piracy bill tabled in our parliament in 2011. It was compiled by MEA. It was a very good document with certain lacuna in it, but it lapsed. I think it's time we need to take a look at it again. Ease judicial procedures, formulate code to prosecute pirates on a common code across the anvil. Perhaps establish courts across various places in India and ASEAN nations, and maybe look at sharing the burden of prosecution imprisonment. Coming to HADR, certain commonalities in the Asian approach is it's generally apolitical, it is decentralized, and the approach is bilateral, government to government, which is against a lot of the Western approach, and that is where we differ from the Western world of HADR. There is adherence to Oslo guidelines of 1994. We respect humanity, impartiality, and neutrality. Already a common framework is in place. So therefore, we have certain existing structures and exercises that are ongoing. There's a whole list that I can list out, but for paucity of time, I will look at, say, the ASEAN Military Ready Group, the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response. As far as India is concerned, the Indian Navy is head of the HADR working group in IONS. Even in IONS, we have 4 member nations of navies and 1 observer from ASEAN nations. We already have 50% on board. Therefore, trying to work a common grid or framework would be that much more simpler. You're not starting from step 1. Milan 2014 was based on HADR. That's the biennial exercise we hold in Port Blair. Komodo 2018 was focused on HADR. And of course, there are the ARF disaster rescue exercises. We already have a common grid. Therefore, what should we look at? Again, establish a framework for India-ASEAN cooperation as far as HADR. We need to thrash out divergent issues. Convergence issues are enough. Get rid of the divergent issues. We have a framework in place. Therefore, there's a need to focus on identification of capacity and capabilities of nations. Certain nations have got core competencies. India has some. ASEAN nations have some. We need to lay it out. Establish coordinating centers. Identify agencies. Lay down the responsibility that these agencies would do. Remember, when a disaster strikes, time is at premium. You cannot think at that point in time. You need to react before you can, and if we have cyclone warning and other tsunami buoys in place, I think we can be proactive instead of reactive. Lay down a method for quick transfer of financial aid. Should cut across all your red tapeism and get it going. Identify type of stores which are required depending upon the season, the nation, and the temperature. And you should also identify types of stores that are taboo and banned. I give you an example of the Gujarat earthquake of 2001, where in all good faith we received a consignment of food, but it turned out to be corned beef. So, therefore, we need to recognize this so that we have the right things going in the right place. With that, before I finish, I would just like to say my idea here is not to rattle the existing world order or international laws and conventions. The idea is to flow with the spirit of existing laws and conventions, and to establish a working framework within these laws and conventions so that the underlying themes are strengthened. I look at the 11 flags behind me and I'm reminded of a football team. We've missed the Russian World Cup. Maybe in the next World Cup we'll be able to go for gold and actually establish a working framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Parmar. I think you touched upon 2 very important areas, piracy and HADR, which were not covered earlier. So I'm glad, I think, that these 2 very important issues pertaining to maritime security were also discussed. The last speaker is Mr. Sai Mian Tint. You have the floor. He is the Director of Marine Administration. Unfortunately, we are all much behind the time. Yes, thank you so much.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, I will take very shortly because it has been long days for us. That's why if I take long, everybody will be angry for me. So, in this presentation, so we have been facing about the blue economy in Myanmar. So, the Myanmar is now, you already know, in ASEAN country, and also face up at the western and southern parts of Myanmar to the sea of the Adman and also Bengal, Bay of Bengal. So the coastline is nearly about 2,400 kilometers. So in land waterways, it's totally 6,650 kilometers. So in our country, it's have some threats and also pollution. So the threats are overfishing and destructive fishing, and also watershed degradation, and also pollution and climate change. These are the effect to our country for the blue economy. So overfishing is now lack of settle of the governance and by illegal and unregulated fishing in Myanmar. So some fishing boats have 1 registered number and 10 fishing boats in. And so also the fishermen also incorporate technology trawling in shoal water. So in coastal, some for tourism, not properly planned for the development, and also, as he said, also distorted near shore habitats, construction and dredging, sediment and pollution. So, and illegal sand mining in our beach and resources construction and destroyed. Watershed degradation is mostly more than 58% lost since 1980, but 88% of 2000 and 2012. So, at the pollution, not only from the ship, but also from land. So, most of the land coming by the waste, such as sewage, garbage, plastic, something like that. And also, these land-based sources come from soil erosion, river pollution, and then atmosphere, something like that, air pollution, and for the ship is polluted by oil, chemical, and also sewage, garbage, and air, also as well as antifouling, and also ballast water. So these effects maybe can suffer acid rain, mycotoxic, global warming, ground level ozone, littering of beaches, marine life, wide shoreline, socioeconomic, toxic air pollution. So, if covered by the oil for the 1%, it will be very dangerous for the ocean and the coastal area because it can be evaporate and oxidation and immune into the water to destroy our sources. And also, why is polluted in the shoreline? It is very difficult to clean up at the shoreline, and also very cost, and it cannot be originated. So, and also the chemical, it is very difficult to clean up. Also, we need technique, mechanical, chemical, biological, something, dispersant agents. So, and also for the beach, and also oil pollution, the birds, seabirds, and wildlife, they are very difficult to fly. So, and also they need to clean up very poorly. So for climate change, in Myanmar, biodiversity, both very true to habitat loss, reduce resilience, economic ecosystem, indirectly to impact people. And so, why they are happen like this in our country? So lack of the inadequate policy and laws, and also coastal communication, alternated livelihood, and weak of collaboration. So we need more institution structures and policy, but in this time they having concern with the three ministry by agriculture and natural resources and then defense for all these pollution. And now we have been forming for the National Environmental Conservation Committee in 2011. And so, for remedy of threats, we have National Marine Spectrum Plan for the Myanmar marine environment, and also Sustainable Fishery Conservation Strategy, and also community-based coastal management and marine protected area, and legal reform and implementation. So in this time in Myanmar, they have been funding for the protected area is only land about 1.03 million for land, but not for the sea area, unfortunately. So that's why we have been challenged for to gain blue economy. So properly step to get a framework, sustainable resources and proper research. And Myanmar do not have adequate knowledge for the skilled manpower and also equipment for research. So that's why I just give the information for the blue economy in Myanmar. It's very difficult to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sai. I think the problems which you outlined are very similar, common to all of us. Same problems faced in India, and I'm sure by countries from ASEAN. So we really, as you say, we have to address, we have to take steps to overcome.